You said that, that Mr. Mulroney had sued the CBC, all the board of directors, or he attempted to. He threatened to sue. But I thought that he wouldn't want to get any money from the public, from Canadian payers. Didn't he say that? Didn't he say that he would not accept a penny from the Canadian taxpayers?
No, well, he sued when he sued in 1995, he said that he was suing for $50 million, but he would only take $25 million. The other $25 would go to charity. So that's what he said then. But in '99, he threatened to sue the board of directors, but he never did sue us for that.
Oh, he didn't do. Okay,
But he did take $2.1 million in legal fees after the settlement with the government in 1997.
And now again.
And now again. Yeah.
Right.
So that's $4 million, $4.1 million. Plus the 300,000, so it's 4.5 million.
I have a question about the difference between libel chill and SLAPP suits, because it seems like we're talking about, at least to the layman anyway, two different things here. One is a public process that is being shut down or stymied by lawsuits, and the other is the case which is, it's happened a lot that journalists get hit with defamation suits, and libel chill is not an unknown thing, whereas SLAPPs seem quite new. Is there a difference between these two kinds of litigations?
Well, if you're asking me, I don't think there's much of a difference. I think that when Schreiber sued me, he slapped me. I couldn't talk anymore. I couldn't participate in the dialogue anymore. I was told not to field phone calls from other journalists. So that's, I mean, the media is simply an extension of the public having a discussion, so I don't see much of a difference. I actually covered a couple of environmental stories in the 1990s to do with the Terrell landfill site, remember that, in Film Services, and one of the journalists there was working with us, a guy named Paul Palango. He was a freelance journalist and working with the Fifth Estate. We did our story, and Philip Services decided to sue him and not us. And there's a guy with no resources. They knew what they were doing, right? If they had sued us, we would have, well, we ended up supporting him, but just a nice ending to the Paul Palango story. Paul Palango was basically accused by the company of maligning them, of falsely accusing them of saying they were manipulating stock, of saying that they had inventories they actually had. And everything Paul Palango said was true, it turned out to be true. But he got drummed out of Hamilton, and ended up going to Nova Scotia, where he works as he does glass pottery with his wife there. But what Paul did is so he was slapped, but he sued back. And 2 years ago he won. He got a big settlement from Philip, and I actually went up to his house in Nova Scotia, and he says, "This is the Film Services new kitchen." And it was just this beautiful big kitchen. So, but he just stuck with that for 5 or 6 years until he finally got it. But I think it's the same thing.
I couldn't agree more. We have to take care to look at it from the public's perspective. These SLAPPs can take numerous forms. One of the things that the developer Big Bay Porn argued was it's not a SLAPP suit because we're in an administrative process and we have every right to bring a claim against you for costs. And that's true in a strict definition of what SLAPP suits, the way they're defined in the United States. That's correct. But I think we need, in finding a solution, we need to look at it from the victim's or the target's perspective. Anything that prevents you from writing a letter to the editor, going to a public meeting and addressing something from a microphone, any legal maneuver that involves lawyers and costs and process that frustrates you or chills you from participation, that's a SLAPP suit. I mean, one other frustrating thing about the experience is that in the developer's case, bringing these motions, the complaints to the Law Society against me was all covered as part of the cost of doing business. The Canadian taxpayer, the Ontario taxpayer, was subsidizing this action, and for him it was just another part of the cost of $1 billion development. These are just part of the approval fees that he has to pay to his legal team. And then when you peel back the onion a little bit further and you look at the relationship between the regulator, the Conservation Authority, and their directors, the municipal politicians who still have an approval process, they took a SLAPP action against me, and now they're sitting in judgment of that permit for that 30-acre hole in the ground, and yet most of the directors on that Conservation Authority are municipal politicians, some of whom, like Roy Bridge, took $750 donations from the lawyers, from Earl Ramanjuranian's lawyers. We have to get at the whole process that allows these regulators to have an impact and an effect on the public who are trying to stop these processes and influence the instruments that give the approval to these developers.
David, I would like you just to elaborate on your comment at the end that you would like to see that the whole process of public meetings be stopped until there is the inability to slap. Are you really tossing that out as an idea as to what you want to see happen to encourage getting anti-slap legislation in place, or what was that?
Yes, most, I think it's 24 or 25 states in the United States have anti-slap suit legislation, and the Quebec bill and the BC bill that of course died were instruments targeted towards tort reform that gives you some relief if you're being the target of defamation or libel. Through my experience, I've been approached by many people. I'll never forget the woman who came up to me and said, our citizens group was opposed to slot machines going into a racetrack, and we went to the Ontario Municipal Board to try and stop that, and we were sued, and we withdrew our opposition to the instrument. And so my concern is that any process that involves lawyers and courts, $35,000 is beyond the means of most citizens groups. If you just want to oppose a project, you're not going to risk that. That's your life savings. And so you're going to withdraw from the process. In the case of the IDA, a real-world situation, there are still tens of millions of dollars in lawsuits hanging out against members of the public. Some are very rich, some aren't. But the point is that when the EA meetings, the environmental assessment meetings come up, people aren't going to go because they know if they say anything, they're going to be slapped, and they're going to be, and so they're effectively chilled. So what I think is an important part of this reform is that you say, if you're a developer and you want to slap somebody, go right ahead. Sue them all you want and let the legal process work its way out. But the province of Ontario should not be conducting statutory public meetings where there is that microphone when there are these slap suits outstanding, because most people aren't going to come and they're not going to avail themselves of that important public right. So any solution that we come up with, it's my opinion, my recommendation, that concept there of a freeze or moratorium be part of the solution so people don't have to go to the microphone when their neighbor's being sued for $15 million. And I should say that Andrew Horvath's bill, Bill 134, actually had a provision for that in the bill, and I approve it because I wrote it. I think it's the only disincentive to a developer. The cost of the lawsuit is not a disincentive to the developer. These are billion-dollar projects, and these are, in some cases, billionaire developers. They do it for fun. That's what a developer told me in the Duffins Rouge case. The only disincentive to them is time, because time is money. And if you're going to slap somebody, that's fine. But then if you can't get your Planning Act application processed, or you can't get your EA processed because you have to have these mandatory public meetings before you do get the approval, that is probably enough to get them to think twice about slapping.